So welcome. Tonight we have a brief program for you on how to build a better defensive line. But before we start, wanted to introduce first, I'm Greg Prasky, the CEO at ARG, and want to welcome you here. Our focus at ARG is we want to help you make better decisions, better technology decisions, and we want to do that by providing you information, knowledge. We get out, we have the pleasure of being out and visiting with some 200 companies every month, so we get to experience quite a bit and have a lot of discussions. And what we want to do is just periodically bring some of that information to you. So that's our goal. But I'd like to thank Comcast, who's sponsoring this event. And we have several people from Comcast. If you guys can signal, they'll be out. So thank you for that. And thanks to the Redskins for providing the facility and this experience. What I'd like to do is turn over to ARG's Vice President, Steve Murphy, who will run you through the program. But thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And again, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We're going to talk about building a better defensive line for your technology operations primarily. What are the biggest threats to your technology operations? Just mentally maybe make a note of two or three of those. Now, it's been surveyed when you ask technology leaders what their greatest threats are, typically they'll focus on external factors such as security breaches, outages, even the weather. And those are all good and valid reasons, but when you actually peel back the onion and look at what really causes technology outage, it's a combination of external factors and internal factors. Things like hardware faults. Human error is one of the biggest reasons why IT failures happen. And then you have the security attacks. We're going to address the top four of these. The security element was addressed in a seminar that we ran about 6 weeks ago. Be happy to talk about any of your security issues moving forward, but we're going to focus on building a technology defensive posture outside of the security conversation right now. So most sports teams, when they're defending, have a multi-layered approach. In football, it's a defensive line, it's linebackers, it's defensive backfield providing a last line of defense. So we're going to kind of adopt that same framework. We're going to talk about access diversity, which is coordinated by an SD-WAN type of technology, and then our last line of defense will be securing your information and being able to recover when an event does strike. So to start it off, I'm going to ask Justin to come up here and talk about access diversity.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, that is an RG3 quote. We'll get through it together. That is, I think, applicable to what we're going to talk about from that defensive line aspect, access diversity. So we're going to hit the football analogies pretty hard tonight, so just bear with me. Well, that quote, let's back up. I think, I've never watched a football game where a quarterback called the snap and just one receiver takes off and they said, hopefully that works. Everybody goes in motion. So kind of the same for access. You want to have more than one option. For better or for worse, gone are the days where your customers come to you and do all of the business that you want to do in your head office. More and more business is being conducted out there. So if you are single-threaded and only have one way to reach the outside world, your business is at risk, and you need to start looking at different ways to reach that outside world. We need to start looking at different ways to get there. What does that mean? Different ways to get diverse media, and that may be a secondary fiber circuit. Maybe easier for some of you than others, maybe cheaper. And it may be something like a coax cable circuit. Less expensive, more prevalent in some areas. And it may be a wireless or 4G circuit, something that gives you a little bit of redundancy without some of the same terrestrial concerns. Mixing access media and even just putting yourself, making yourselves less dependent on one provider for that diversity kind of eliminates that dependency. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. That green line on the screen here is Comcast fiber coming up the drive, and so Comcast is a good partner to the Redskins. So let's say that the Redskins, for some reason, had critical data that they wanted to store on site, even though they're a long punt away from every data center on Earth. And that just needs to sit here. But they need to connect in a redundant form out to one of these other providers. How would you go about doing that? So I would look at fiber first. So who has fiber in the building today? That's probably a pretty easy one to answer. I would imagine most of you folks know who's got fiber in your building. Whether you have to put a hard shoulder into the door of the telco closet to find out, you can figure that out. Who's eager to light your building? Again, not too hard to figure out. I'm guessing you guys get hounded by salespeople having an exciting offer for you to light your building. So you'll get some of that information inbound. But does that give you the whole picture, and is it accurate? Are they really going to build? Then you also have to consider who's got fiber right outside of your building and who can build that. But you know, build costs aren't always the same across the board. Some folks will assess the full build cost to you and let you pay for all of it and give your next door neighbor a great deal on a circuit. And I don't know, I'm just not that generous, I guess. I don't want to be that guy. So you got to consider those things. And then who's blocks away? But what, you know, this company may have just tons of cash set aside to build and light buildings. To be quite honest, that's hard to know unless you're engaged at the finance and executive level, but those are discussions that we're having. So fiber aside, what are some ways, if you know in your area, you know, fiber is just not the way to go. Fiber build is going to be cost prohibitive. Can we create media diversity? So that's where we're starting to get into those coax cable discussions, you know, maybe some fixed wireless types of things. And really getting out of that last mile kind of conflict. How can we build that kind of true diversity without a collapsed lateral? So everybody coming into that last little bit of conduit for those last few feet into your building, whether it's coax, fiber, and everybody wants to use that same little tube into the building, how do we avoid that? So maybe a 4G or satellite or fixed wireless even to avoid that last little stretch. You know, it doesn't have to cost a ton, but you can still provide extra layers of diversity. And so, great, you've built all this diversity, you got a handful of extra circuits that are backing each other up. What do you do with it? And that's what I want Ray to come talk to us about.
Thank you for letting me do it this way. Usually they have me in a rocking chair, so I'm just sitting there talking about all the old war stories. Justin just shared with us that you have to have intentionality, you have to have a plan by virtue of building in redundancy, but much like the Redskins, you come to the game with a game plan, but isn't it nice to, when all else fails, be able to be audible, an audible play. Not sure how much the audience has heard about SD-WAN. There's a lot of good positive energy, but basically today we're not going to talk about the geek stuff about SD-WAN. Let's focus on the benefits of what this means. And to help me help you understand the relevance, concede for me one thing, that today your networks have basically been turned inside out. As I was growing up and cutting my teeth on helping customers get networks, they were all very deliberate. They were intentional because they were top down. You knew the traffic patterns because everything stayed inside your network. Your users now are going to AWS, they're going to Azure, they're going to Salesforce, they're going outside of your network. And frankly, I gather that most of us couldn't even spend 15 minutes out in the lobby without double checking being connected on a network, because that's the way we operate these days. So think of the context of SD-WAN as a couple of the parameters that we're going to share with you. Basically, think of SD-WAN as a box that you're going to be putting in front of your network. that the very first thing it's going to do is let you aggregate all of your bandwidth. Much like a quarterback is surveilling the field, I want to be able to look at the whole field. I want to be able to use the whole field. Today, most networks are built so you've got your primary connection one way, secondaries failover. It's a manual process to fail over, and you're basically conceding, I have this bandwidth that I'm using most of the time, and this bandwidth that I'll use some of the time. Again, back to the quarterback, back to the audible. I want to be able to see the whole field and use it all the time. Constantly monitor my WAN link performance. How many people might have used Waze to get here today? And Waze basically showed you options of how to get to Redskin Park, and it was paying attention to what was being congested or what have you. I'd wager to say that even though most of you might think that your internet connectivity is okay, I'm not so sure how much you really are sure that it's really okay. So another aspect of SD-WAN is constantly monitoring your WAN link performance, so again, you get to use the whole field. Recognizing priority applications. When I was growing up, it was all about the network. The network had to be reliable and predictable, and the CIOs and the IT department were protecting the network. But we just said that the network has been flipped inside out. So it's not the network performance anymore, it's the application performance. How you folks are trying to get out to the rest of the world and do your job, not only the C-suite, but your constituents. So recognize priority applications and sessions and destinations is actually becoming more imperative. Deliver an always-on or safety, a fail-safe environment versus a failover. Again, leverage everything that you have and don't have to worry about the failover. Let the fail safety be automatic. And report all over network health utilization. Now that we need to go ahead and be cognizant of where we're trying to get to, applications are basically saying, I need my fair share and I need you to guarantee it. So you got to trust and verify. And that's what SD-WAN is doing. And folks, if you're starting to think, gosh, Ray, you're sounding like this is a router, this is a firewall. Actually, the SD-WAN implementations are addressing those kinds of points of view. And simplify the provisioning. You guys, you want to be strategic. You have other initiatives that you want to work on. Let's demystify how to get all this set up and be that audible, be that quarterback that I can go ahead and simplify both the configuration, deployment, and the management. So for the geeks in the room, I'm a geek. Let's recap what we're just trying to show you. Basically, in the middle on the left, link aggregation. Now all of a sudden, I could leverage my MPLS if I want to. I can leverage my internet, but now I'm using the whole field. I can go ahead and leverage my access agility. We're giving you free agency, folks. This technology says if I want to go ahead and substitute a cable modem with a dedicated internet, I can do that. I can even bring in 4G. All of a sudden, I keep thinking, I'm using the whole field. I have fail safety. Look over on the right-hand corner. Fail safety is important because I'm trying to get to those critical applications at a data center or headquarters. I now have that ability to have confidence. And we're going to touch on the next one at the 12 o'clock position. In the portal, I can go ahead and actually do the things that I need to be able to leverage the SD-WAN and the capabilities. Guys, I love this slide because here's what I'm trying to get at. I bet you half the folks in the audience, when you ordered Christmas packages from Amazon, I bet you were watching the status and you were watching the UPS guy and tracking him and where my package is. But you know what? You don't do that for your data. You just trust that your internet is behaving. And so SD-WAN is going to enable you to track your package. And the most critical package is your constituents and your C-suite's applications. So what this is showing you is in this, on the left-hand diagram, is the health of the network and the connectivity. Then it goes on to get a little bit granular and it's giving you the stats. Remember we said about Waze? Waze was telling you, oh, I got congestion. Oh gosh, I just lost a packet in terms of car just went off the road. All these things are very relevant in SD-WAN and all relevant in how you guys are now trying to accommodate the inside out of your network. So this just diagrams a little bit more of that deeper dive. It can take you at the high level down to the low level. And I would argue, folks, most of this you can't see today. You're either buying other net utilities like NetFlow or other utilities to see that. So in SD-WAN defensive measures, use all the bandwidth that you're paying for. Move all from failover to fail-safe, always on continuity. Be intentional, QoS priority awareness. So we're not conceding that with MPLS, if I disconnect an MPLS, am I going to basically sacrifice QoS? With these boxes talking end to end, they can actually honor the same kinds of quality of service and quality of experience that you can with an MPLS network. See and respond to the network anomalies. Again, it's that Waze kind of feel. Reduce WAN and VPN management, because again, you see what's going on in your network and you're being proactive. At this juncture, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Jim Begley. He's our cloud specialist, and it's all about being intentional in that regard as well.
That's right. So I love technology. I love it. And one of the most impressive things that I learned today is that Ray knows how to use Waze. That blows me away. So, I had to do it. I want to make this clear. Vince Lombardi's up here with the quote, and I love this quote, right? Because it's not whether you get knocked down, because we all get knocked down. It's how we get up, right? And we keep getting up. But again, just want to point out, Vince Lombardi retired as a Redskin. Just anybody out there who thinks of him differently, we all know where he came from, okay? So, with that, throw this up. Anybody, we had a little event this week, and I don't know if anybody else noticed, a lot of people lost power. Anybody out there lose power? Okay, got a couple, okay? So when I look at it, I think it's very interesting, because I think about the impact, and the impact to me was refrigerator, some spoiled food, 2 days no power. Then I drive down the street and I see it's Freddy's pizza place out of power 2 days. It's a little bit more impact there. They didn't have customers for 2 days. They lost an entire freezer of food, right? So we lost maybe a couple $100 in my house. They lost thousands, right? Thousands on inventory, and the impact that they had from not having any revenue come in the door, right? Big impacts. And those are things that we're trying to measure in here. They're important things. They're things that are real impacts to the organization. Some of them might be smaller than others, but it's impactful nonetheless. So one of the things that we want to talk about is, where is your infrastructure? Right? It's a good offense is also good defense. If we're scoring, if we're able to do that, we're going to eliminate those challenges that we have. So think about where your infrastructure is today. We have, anecdotally, about 40 to 50% of our customer base still has stuff on-premise. That's a pretty big number. And we would suppose and try to impart you to move that stuff, if not into the cloud, to a secure data with infrastructure behind it. And this is for all applications, all your critical applications, your voice applications, your compute applications. Those things need to be leveraged and moved out to enable that to be better managed. And then we talk about recovery strategies. This gets a little muddled for a lot of people. Disaster recovery, backup as a service. Hey, we have people in our office sometimes who think it's the same thing as well. And we have that to step back and challenge around that. Is really, what are you doing with your infrastructure? How much of it needs to be disaster recovery versus just a regular backup? And really look at that from what's critical, what's less critical, and drive that conversation. And then specifically, this speaks to what are we trying to protect against? A lot of times people think about the crater. They think about those impacts where I'm gonna have a meteor fall out of the sky and take out my infrastructure. But that's not the reality of what most of our impacts are. Most of the impacts are things like, I went to my Gmail account and I opened up a document, and that document then had a virus on it that proliferated through the organization. That's a real impact, and that's really what we see with a good backup and disaster recovery strategy that goes across those things. We're able to to make sure that we're supporting our customers and bringing those things back quickly and resolving those issues. And then the other thing, we're in a practice facility. We're not at the stadium on game day, so we need to execute our practices. We need to make sure that we're doing that, at least annually, doing those practices, stepping through the process that our customers are gonna, that our end users are gonna have to go through, understanding the impact of all of those things. Today, if your stuff is on-prem at your location, premise, today, we would ask you to move it out. Whether that be a clouded infrastructure, secure data center, we can work through that and get you to the right place for you. But if there's a service loss, what we want to do is enable you to leverage SD-WAN with high-quality internet connectivity to disaster recovery. This will allow you to have a seamless approach to your infrastructure being up to the level of your needs. Everybody has different requirements, and we just want to help you build out that goal. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Steve.
Thanks, Jim. Everyone received a handout when they came in with some budgetary pricing that we did for your location or one of your locations if you're a multi-locational organization. And that's a good starting place. This fills it out a little bit more. You don't need to jot this down. If you want a copy of this presentation, just let anyone from ARG know, and we'll get it to you. But these are sort of the entry-level price points for the technologies that we've talked about. Nothing is scary on this sheet. Nothing that we've talked about is something that needs typically additional budget approved. Even the disaster recovery has a service component. So, what's next? How do you start to build a better defense for your organization? Well, first thing you need to do is understand your requirements. What do you need to protect? Then do a baseline assessment. What assets do you have to address those requirements? And that will lead you to the gaps that you have. And then identify how you can solve for those gaps, prioritize your action plan, and then implement. Sounds like a lot of work. Everyone's saying, "Oh, that sounds great." Don't have the time or energy to do that. Well, that's why we would ask you to consider ARG. Use us as an extension of your staff. Help us take on some of that burden in evaluating the solutions and taking on some of the implementation efforts.